Good morning. As she said, my name is Michele McNichol, and I'm really glad to see such a full room. I thought, who's going to come listen to me talk today? Because it's really interesting. When I first got asked to speak, I thought, why me, right? I'm not Scott McClellan, the former president of HEB who does commercials with sports stars. It's not me. I'm not John McCullough. He's the CEO of James Avery, a well-known jewelry brand. That's a really cool job. Who wouldn't want to do that? I'm just Michele McNichol. So why am I here? On prompt reflection, I think I figured it out. The reality is my story is probably much like any of you in this room and your journey to leadership. So let's start at the beginning. Yeah, I know, right? Who would post this picture? But anybody in my generation has one of these pictures from the 70s. The haircut's my mom's fault, not mine. I fixed it as soon as I could. But the reason I'm here is because I just started as a kid growing up middle class in the Midwest. I didn't come from a place of affluence. There wasn't a dream of being a CEO or even a senior leader. The dream of this 11-year-old kid was, let's get an education so I can get a job so I can have a good family. That's it. I didn't think about being a CEO or how am I going to lead groups of people. But over the years, I gained a lot of experiences. I got a lot of opportunities, and I was a yes, right? I took all those opportunities to expand my knowledge and learn and observe, right? I think one of the things that I'm proudest of is how I observed good leadership, bad leadership, how people interact, how you get teams to do what you need them to do and how you don't. And through all those experiences, in the course of time and being a yes, I got the opportunity to work into a CEO. So in 2014, a pretty pivotal year in my life. In January of that year, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. I was mid-career. I was elevating through an organization. I was an EVP at that time, leading a big part of the business, but I wasn't a CEO. In October of that year, October 14th, he passed away. So 9 months later, he was gone. My whole life was in turmoil at that time. 3 weeks later, I was approached and asked if I wanted to be CEO of the organization in the Americas. 3 weeks later. I was like, well, let me think about that. Here's the first lesson. Opportunities don't come when they're convenient. They come when they come. So what I said on that day was it was a role I was interested in because I loved leading people and I knew I had something to offer that organization. I simply said I needed some time. I asked for 6 months. 6 months so I could get my life back in order, figure out, who takes out the trash now. My husband's not here. So I asked for 6 months' time. What happened was, 6 weeks later, I got the call, you're going to assume the role the following week. 6 weeks, not 6 months, 6 weeks. So in December of 2014, I became CEO of what was then Wood Group Mustang. At that time, we were about 10,000 people. It was a worldwide organization. I was doing about $2 billion of revenue. That's what I was responsible for at that time. Quickly, though, right after that, I got to lead us through a complete rebrand. We did away with the whole Mustang brand, the brand I grew up with, and I had to lead 10,000 people and make them understand why we were debranding and becoming Wood. We also went through a major leadership change. So my boss, the person I said yes to in November, changed out 4 months later. I got a new boss. Didn't know him. Never met him until he became my boss. So that I had to go through a leadership change, which led to a lot of structural changes. We ended up having to rebrand or reorganize the whole company. So we went from service lines to a regional structure. So in a very short amount of time as a CEO, I had to do rebranding, leadership change, restructure a company. That's a lot of learning that took on in that first year of being a CEO. So I did all that, and I learned a lot, and we're going to talk about some of those learnings in a few minutes. But we get to 2017, and I decided, you know what, the company had gone through such a cultural shift. It wasn't a company I could no longer support. I didn't believe in what they believed in. I really had deep-rooted leadership style that's about culture, right? And that's what we're all here to talk about. is about how do you build culture. And the culture that company stood for, maybe it worked for some, it didn't work for me. So in 2017, I decided to step away from a CEO job. The only reason I was able to do that, I think, is because I had lost my husband, right? That's the biggest tragedy in the world. And I figured if I can live through that, I can live through a job change. So in 2017, I stepped away. When I first left, I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. Thought I might retire, might teach, do some board work, right? Things normal retirees do. But I had a fateful lunch one day with a private equity group who really was asking me to lead a company for them. And I spent 4 hours and I laid out a whole business plan. And I wish I had kept that napkin because I wrote it all down. But in that afternoon, I realized what my calling was, because I really knew then my passion was about creating a company where we could build a strong culture, do amazing work, and compete with anybody in the world by creating a culture that allowed people to be empowered to do their very best work. And then you get the right people and it grows from there. So we started Arion. We spent 6 months in the fall of 17 developing a business plan, talking to clients, asking what needs to be different. Why would you hire somebody new? Because you got to figure out how you differentiate, right? I didn't want to be just like everybody else. But you got to go listen. You got to listen to what's not being served in the market to form that organization. So who is Arion? So Arion is a full-service EPCM, engineering, procurement, construction management company. So it's very much like what Wood and other big engineering houses in Houston do. The difference is we are very much purpose-driven, very purpose-driven. I'm going to share that in a few moments. The other piece of it is about the culture. It is about being different and treating people differently that creates the environment where they want to come and give you their very best effort. All that discretionary effort that each and every one of us choose, whether we give out to an organization or we don't. That's what's different about us. Where are we at today? As you saw in the video, we started with 8 people. We had 8 briefcases when we showed up to our sublet space, and I was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? Today we sit at 310 people, and we got COVID in the middle of that too. So you got to remember, in 2018, we're growing fast. COVID hits, I have to lay off half the folks that we had hired. But we've rebounded from that. We're 310 people doing about $100 million worth of revenue. Really proud of what we've accomplished as an organization. But how did we get there? Well, as I said, you got to be clear on purpose. And this I find a lot of organizations and leaders and entrepreneurs, they give this just a passing glance. They don't spend the time to get really clear what's your purpose. Why do you exist? And how do you want to exist in the universe? So before we ever opened the doors, we actually crafted this purpose statement. So this is what Arion stands for. We deliver successful projects. That success is measured by our clients, not by us. Of course, we have our own success measures, but our success measures really pale in comparison if we haven't delivered a quality product to the person who has hired us, who we want to hire us again. It almost doesn't matter. So that success is measured by our clients. Did we deliver what they needed us to deliver? And then how do we do it? We do it every time. Now that may seem inherent, like who wouldn't want to be successful every single time? But the reason that's in this purpose statement is to remind us that, when a project's easy and you got a well-defined scope and an easy budget and an easy client, you can deliver success really pretty easily. But we all live in the reality of project world. In project world, you rarely have a well-defined scope. You have unrealistic expectations on budget and cost. And sometimes you have really difficult clients. And if any of you are difficult clients, well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But part of what we are at Arion is we're going to deliver success even with all those barriers. Having come from big business where it was easy to make an excuse and blame somebody else. It's a vendor's fault, it's the client's fault, it's my colleague down the hall's fault for why we can't deliver. All those things are probably true, and our company is one that's focused on how do you deliver success anyway, no matter what. The example I always use, we had a difficult project about 4 years ago at this point, and we didn't make any money. We actually lost money on the job. It would have been easy to walk away from that job, kind of get it tidied up enough and then push it out. We didn't do that. We stayed with that client till the very end, got them up fully operational. They're making a bunch of money at our expense. We didn't make any money on the job, but we stayed with them. And we're still working with that client today. And I believe it's because of this purpose and remembering why we put these words in here. Then how do we do this? By revolutionizing the process. Revolutionizing is a big, bold word. We actually toiled, is this the right word to put into this purpose statement to tell God and the world, this is who we are, but it is. What we mean by revolutionizing the process is that we are willing to change anything and everything in the pursuit of delivering successful projects every time. We rethink work processes. How do we use tools more effectively? How do we really leverage technology to improve the value that we add to the projects and bring more efficiency? To be in that mindset, though, you've got to be willing to change anything, right? So you've got to be willing to leave how it used to be and how you've always done it to look for the new and improved way of doing that. You've got to be willing to revolutionize everything. And then it was important to put our values in our purpose statement, in my opinion, because this is how we will treat people, all people, whether you're an employee, whether you're a vendor, or whether you're a client. All people deserve to be treated with respect and trust first. That is not earned. All humans deserve to be treated with respect and trust. That's our founding principle. That's in our purpose, is to start there. With that, we give our employees a tremendous amount of autonomy to do what they need to do to deliver those successful projects. And how does that work? Well, you have to have strong accountability. Accountability, we talk about that a lot, but what does that mean? Accountability means doing what you say you're going to do. Really simple. Doing what you say you're going to do. And so that is part of our value system, is we have accountable people. And what does that really mean, right? We all make commitments every day. But sometimes we overcommit. Sometimes there's a miscommunication. There's mistakes that happen. We just can't do what we said we were going to do. Accountability is being able to raise your hand in an environment where it's safe to own that and say, I made a mistake, I got a problem, so that this organization can come together and fix that. Not so we can fire them, berate them, get them out the door, so we can fix it. Because a fundamental belief is that all humans come to work to do a good job. Nobody comes to work and says, I'm going to screw this up today. That just doesn't happen. If it does, it's the rarest of occasions. So if you start with that premise, that you respect and trust them, they didn't come here to do something wrong, then it's a breakdown that's happened in the organization. You just got to figure out what that breakdown was and then fix it and communicate with your clients and all the things. So accountability, huge. Last piece is innovation, and people often tell me, is that really a value? Yes, it is a value, because it's a mindset. Our mindset in innovation is this, is that even if today is perfect, everything went really well, how do you get better tomorrow? That has to be a mindset. And we put it in here and we talk about it with every single new hire and we reiterate it all the time because that is the mindset we work with. Is how are you going to get better tomorrow? How do you add more value? How do you get more efficient? How do you work better with your coworkers? It has to be in the forefront of your mind all the time. Otherwise, you get into that routine of just doing the same thing the same way repetitively. And the place where we want to be is thinking more broadly. All right. So we'll boil this down. You've seen our logo, right? People, performance, and innovation. We call those the pillars of our business. People are the heart of their business and the reason for our success. And I think I've talked about that a lot. But the right people in an organization aren't just smart people. You've got to get people who are aligned to that purpose. So in our case, it is about aligned and working as a team and truly believing that 1 + 1 is more than 2. It's 3 or 5 or 10. They've got to be in that mindset. They've got to have a client focus. They've got to be willing to listen and be willing to innovate. So we spend a lot of effort getting the right people in our company. And I encourage you guys to do that too. And not everybody's a fit, and that's okay. You got to get people who are like-minded on purpose, not on every single aspect of it, but at least on purpose, they need to be like-minded. The second piece is performance, right? And I just spoke about this. You got to back up good people and good culture with performance. At the end of the day, we're all businesses. We run businesses to make money. So you've got to have good performance. But to do that, you gotta have the right people, a great culture, and a focus on that performance. So you can't let people off the hook. If people aren't performing, you gotta call it out. You gotta have those conversations. Again, not to make them wrong, but to figure out how do you fix what's not working. And the last piece, of course, is innovation. I've talked a lot about this, but it really is about thinking about how do you be better every single day. So that's the backstory, right? I still serve as CEO and plan to do so for a while. I'm not sure when the end is. I often get asked that question. But as I've now crossed the 10-year mark of us being a CEO over 2 organizations, leading through all the big company changes as well as now kind of entrepreneurial startup challenges, I'm going to share some of the lessons I've learned, and hopefully those will resonate with some of you, some or all of them. So let's start with be authentic. All right? Do you love this? I was really happy with this. I'm like, how do I get there? Right? It's amazing what AI can do for you. But this is just a funny way of saying what I think is really important. As we take on these leadership roles, we often feel like we have to change who we are. You have to live into being a CEO, and you hide parts of yourself. You don't want to be vulnerable. So, like, I'm a funny person, as you guys were. I like to tell a lot of jokes, right? I've heard CEOs say you can't do that. You just got to be stern, and you got to be this leader. And my contention over 10 years of this is that will become fake and plastic, just like this right-hand person. As much as I'd love to look like that, that's not who I am. I have gray hair, a little overweight. That's who I am. I'm authentic. And you get all of me. And I would contend all of you as leaders need to offer all of you as well. Don't think because you're in a leadership role that you can't be you. Don't let that go. Be authentic. It'll resonate better, and you'll feel better about that, because when you try to pretend to be something you're not, people know. You know, when you try to elevate yourself to a different level and pretend that you're above or whatever, it just doesn't work. So my first piece of advice is be authentic. Be authentic, and it will serve you really well. Here's my next one. Stay connected and relatable. So this picture, we had a bunch to pick from because they make me wear costumes all the time at work. It's a true fact. This is when we hit 300 employees. We all the management team dressed up from the movie 300, if you guys are familiar with that. And we went around and saw every employee, and what's in my hand is a little charcuterie board and a charcuterie cup and a magnetic koozie that acknowledged the point that we'd gotten to 300. And we walked around, and every single employee we talked to, in costume, handing out goodies. Why do we do that? You guys have probably all experienced this in your organizations or seen it in other organizations where leadership can sometimes get separated, right? We call it I've heard it called lots of things, a puzzle palace, the ivory tower, and you get disconnected from the employees, right? I worked my way up. I started as a process engineer back in the day. I'm a Kimmy, worked my way up through the organization. I have relationships throughout that organization. From corporate services and admins to the security guard, all the way to every project manager and executive team. I encourage you, do not allow yourself as a leader to get disconnected from the organization, because that's where the knowledge lies. What's really happening in your organization is down at the working level. And if you're sitting up here and you don't have connections down into that organization, you're going to get disconnected. You're going to be making decisions without the right information. You really need to stay connected at all levels of the organization. Now, I've been told, and I've heard others say this, well, when you do that, you have those relationships deep in the organization, it prevents you from making difficult decisions. I absolutely disagree with that. Having those relationships allows you to have the difficult conversations, and they know it comes from a place of authenticity. So I want to go back to being authentic, right? It comes from a place of being authentic. You can have difficult conversations because you have those relationships. When you don't have those relationships and you just make what seems to be disconnected decisions, then people don't respect you. They don't understand the why. They are not connected to you, and they will not respect you in the same level, in the same way. So my second piece of advice is stay connected and relatable, in costume or not, your choice. This was a lot of fun, though. If you haven't done it, I encourage you to do it. It'll just make you have a little bit of fun and laugh at yourself. And you get to post pictures like this at presentations. Third piece, stay rooted in your purpose. So a few slides back, I spent quite a bit of time talking about the purpose of our organization. I did that with purpose. And the reason is because I think any organization needs to have very clear expectations of themselves. What are you going to do, and how are you going to do it, and what do you value? And the more that you can articulate that and really get it boiled down to how does that influence your everyday life, the better you're going to be. It drives every decision of an organization if done correctly. Because you have purpose, you know what you're trying to accomplish, so you make decisions based on that. And so I use this tree with this root system because I hope this will help land this. Purpose is the roots. That is what holds you, it grounds you to what you're trying to accomplish. And the better rooted that you are in that purpose, it allows you to actually flourish and grow and get bigger. Now imagine if you don't have that clarity of purpose, your root system's a whole lot smaller, you're going to curtail your ability to flourish and grow. And I know everybody doesn't believe that, but I do, so I get to say it today. Because I drive myself every day to think about purpose. Why am I doing what I'm doing? How does it relate to achieving that purpose? And as I look at the rapid growth, coming back from COVID and everything that we've done, it's because we're very clear on purpose. And so I would encourage everybody to stay rooted in purpose. So as leaders, some of you probably aren't CEOs, you don't get to define your purpose. Companies all have that. But I would encourage you as a leader, if you can't change the purpose, really interpret it for your team. What does that purpose mean for your team? What does success look like? How do you want to be? What does success look like? How are you going to measure it? Because the more definitive you can be about that, again, you will flourish. It gives you roots to grow off of and drive like-mindedness in decision-making to accomplish the goal. So I really encourage you to stay rooted in purpose. This is one of my favorites. Don't get sucked into the busy work. As leaders, we're all high achievers, right? And a lot of the things we do as you get more senior in an organization, they are not quickly resolved. We can't check them off at the end of the day. So what we find ourselves doing, and I fall trapped to this as well, is we find the easy stuff so that we can cross something off and we go home at 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whenever we all go home, is that we feel like we accomplished something. And for a short amount of time, that's okay, right? Because we all need to feel like we accomplished something. But as a leader, and especially as a CEO, you can't get sucked into where you're doing that for too long. You need to be self-aware and realize that you're doing this so that you figure out how to move on quickly. Because if you're sucked into the busy work, you're not worried about the big stuff. Right? And as a CEO, the thing I have come to appreciate more than anything is that if I am not looking to the future, and I'm not talking about next week or next month, I'm talking 1 year, 5 years, 10 years out, guess what? Nobody else in the organization is either. That's the big stuff. That's driving purpose and thinking about long-term, how do you get there? Because if you're not doing it in your leadership, you're not getting them to do that, and we're all worrying about all the little busy work and keeping ourselves occupied but not focused, nobody's focusing on the future. So again, I encourage you to think about the big stuff. And even though we all have those days, and I do too, where you need to just say, I got to get something done, do some busy work, but know you're doing it. Know you're doing it, get it off your list, and then get back to the things that really matter. Purpose-driven leadership. Big stuff. Oh, another one of my favorites. You can't and won't know everything. And it's okay. No one expects you to know everything. I know when I first became CEO, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to know every answer to every question that 14,000 employees are going to ask me. You can't do it, guys. You can't. What you need to acknowledge is where are your weaknesses so that you build your team around you to augment what you don't know. And it's okay. Get that team of experts around you. Fill in the finance side, right? I had no aspirations to be a CPA. So my CFO is a CPA. Do it. You do all that for me. Bring me data. Anyway, you've got to build that team around you because you're not going to know everything. And I love this quote. This was one my coach gave me probably 10 years ago. If you think you know everything, you will learn nothing. And that couldn't be truer, right? In these leadership roles, you must be decisive and make decisions, but you need to be open-minded and listen to a variety of inputs so that you are making informed decisions. And don't get in your own head thinking that you know everything. We all formulate responses, but be open to taking in other people's advice and knowledge and experience to inform that decision. And if you do that well, and you have the right people around you that don't think just like you, you need diversity in thought, you will actually make better, more informed decisions. I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning of this slide. You're not going to know everything, and it's okay. Get okay with that. Living in that uncomfortableness of not knowing it's not that bad once you do it. But it's scary at first because you think I'm supposed to know everything. I'm the CEO of an organization. Another oldie but a goodie. Nothing's handled until it's handled. And I hate when people read slides, but I'm going to read this to you because I really want you guys to hear this. A task, issue, or challenge is not resolved by simply thinking about it, worrying about it, talking about it, or putting it off. Right? How many times as a leader have you said, why is it taking so long to get this issue resolved? We've talked about it 100 times. I know in my leadership team, we have that conversation frequently. It's because you're not following all the way through. Right? It is, we want to come up with the solution and move on to the next problem. But you have to take the time to make sure that whatever that solution is gets fully implemented. Well, first it's got to be actioned. Who's going to come up with the solution and the actual tangible steps to do that? Then you've got to make sure it's implemented. And here's the important step. You got to make sure that the implementation is actually being followed. And that takes some policing of follow through. And not just one time, because change is hard. People don't like change. And if you're not paying attention, guess what they do? They pull back and do it the old way. So when we implement change and we're trying to change the direction of an organization or a work product or anything, you got to follow through multiple times to really make sure it's done. Done. Because that's when it's handled, when it becomes embedded knowledge and it's what people are routinely doing. And then you can move on. Now, not to say that a leadership team has to get stuck into just one at a time. I'm not saying that at all. You can deal with multiple issues, but just remember those ones where you finish and you think you've got an action plan and somebody's assigned to it, you're not quite done yet. You've got to follow all the way through, and not only to implementation, but policing to making sure it's actually implemented repetitively, and that's when it's done. And I find all too often this is where leadership teams fall down because they move on too quickly and then they're disappointed that they didn't get the result that they were looking for. So nothing's handled till it's handled. Be courageous. Leaders must be courageous. And what that means is you got to be willing to take risk, right? If we just did the same thing the same way every time, you will ultimately go out of business. So leaders must be courageous. But here's the important part about being courageous. You can't be arrogant. Because you can spark that flame, but if you do it from a place of arrogance and you start believing your own story that you're telling everybody, you turn into a dumpster fire. Who wants to be a dumpster fire? That does not look controlled. So again, I think leadership is you kind of make sure that you're making decisions for the right reasons, not out of your own arrogance or believing your own story so much that you're taking unmitigated risk. You have to be calculated about what you're doing and think ahead. But you have to take risk. That's the other side of this, right? You can't be overly conservative and not take risk because you're not going to change, you're not going to advance, you're not going to move your organization forward. So this is a fine line, but I encourage you to think when you're doing it, just ask yourself, take that 10 seconds and say, is this coming from a place of calculated risk, or am I being arrogant and thinking I can change the world and start a dumpster fire? You don't want to be a dumpster fire. So, courageous but not arrogant. Now, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this. I talked about it on the video. We talk about this a lot. You probably heard it in many leadership talks. But mentorship, I think, is hugely important. All of us, if we really are honest with ourselves, look back at our career, between informal and formal mentors, we had people who were pivotal in our lives, who changed our course. I talked about one when I was 24 years old, which is a long time ago, but I can remember that conversation like it was yesterday because it just resonated me at the right time, and it hit, and it has stuck with me all these years about being curious and challenging. Why are you doing what you're doing, and how do you be better? And when you get stuck and it doesn't feel like you're curious anymore, you got to do something different. I use that to make tons of decisions throughout my career. Mentorship is hugely important. We all got where we are because of mentors. I'm going to say there's nobody in this room who hasn't had the benefit of an informal or formal mentor. Therefore, on the back end of that, our knowledge and experience is a gift. We need to share that with the next generation. I look back at how did I get to this place, and I had all these great mentors and experiences. And I'm questioning in my organization, am I giving the next generation those same experiences and opportunities? That's why I spend so much time on mentorship. One of the stories I tell them, people ask why I spend so much time. Because I lead, I'm going to say I get a lot of data, but at the end of the day, my decision making is based on my gut feel. So gut feel, what does that come from? It's just experience. It's experience and knowledge. But ultimately, it's like, what's my gut telling me? Well, how do you develop that? You gotta have experiences. So that's what we share with people, right? Who wouldn't want our next generation to learn more quickly and not have to go through all the pain points we all went through? The only way that you can help accelerate that learning is through mentorship. And does it take time? Yep, it does. It does. But you have to view it as part of your succession planning and your development, and you need to take the time out to do it, even when you're really busy. So I mentor during the day and I work a little later at night, but for me, it's so important to share with the next generation. And again, I view this as a gift to them. This is why I do it. But we have to bring that next generation on and share the knowledge that we have, and the better that we do that, the faster you actually accelerate that learning and your advancement of your organization. So mentorship, even though it's an overused word and everybody talks about it, I'm talking about it again today because it really is essential to all organizations, and I think a key part of leadership, because if you're a true leader, you're willing to share that knowledge and experience. This is one you probably don't hear in these kind of leadership talks. But early on, when I became a CEO, I realized the role can be all-consuming. And senior leaders, it's true for all of you. It can be all-consuming. You can spend every day and night doing your job. And I encourage you to get some outside interest. So I got involved in the community because I wanted to make sure I didn't lose perspective. Because what we do is very important. Running our businesses is hugely important. It's the most important thing we do. And we're part of a bigger world. So I got involved with Junior Achievement. I got involved with American Cancer Society. I got involved at Texas A&M, where I got my education, to give back and be part of a bigger community and give people opportunity, because it helps me keep perspective on what I'm doing. And then I come back and I'm a better leader as a result of that. And so I encourage all of you to find an opportunity to give back. Think about the broader community that you can serve as well as your organization. Because I'll continue to give you perspective. I think it's really important. We're almost there. This is one I put up here. This is my favorite place in the whole world. This is St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands. This is where I go to recharge. When I first became CEO, my executive coach said, you need to make time for yourself. You will not be the best version of yourself if you do not do this. Because you're giving, right? Everything I've talked about in the previous, I think, 11 slides is about giving to your teams, giving to your clients, giving back to the community. You are pouring out energy all the time. You've got to find opportunities to recharge yourself. So for me, I go and sit in nature. I love to be near an ocean. Sunsets and sunrises are my favorite. If you look at my camera reel, that is what I have lots and lots of because it just gives me energy. Again, it's about perspective. I realize that what we do, right, we live in a bubble and we're in this oil field and doing all our work. But when you go sit in nature, you realize we're just a speck in the big universe. We're just a speck, an important speck and a very valuable one, but we're just a speck. And that recharges me. And so what I try to do is I put it on my calendar, and I encourage you guys to do this once a quarter to find something to recharge yourself. Now, I'll be honest, do I do it every quarter? Probably not. I'm doing good if I do it 3 times a year. But every quarter it comes up and I think about how am I recharged? Where am I at? What's my internal battery? Because if you don't do this, right, we'll just keep powering through, and that's what I did at the beginning, is you just power through, but you're really not bringing your best self. You have to recharge yourself so that you are bringing the energy and the enthusiasm and the momentum into your organization. So I encourage you to take some time, recharge yourself. You can't do it every day. I wish I could. I wish I could live here. But that's going to happen later. But find a way to recharge yourself and get your battery full so you come back and bring that best version of yourself. And this is my last one. As a leader, it's important to remember it's not all about you. And there's days when you want it to be, right? You want to tell people, just do it because I said so. I'm the CEO. And if anybody out there says they don't think it, I know you're wrong. You're lying to yourself because we do. But these leadership positions exist in support of the people we lead. It is a servant leader model. It is the one that brings you success. It's taking care of those people, and they take care of your business. And you can't lose sight of that, no matter how high you go in an organization or how much responsibility you have. It isn't about you. It's about the people. And what you do is taking care of them as well as yourself, but it's not all about you. And you can't lose sight of that, and it's easy to do sometimes because you're just sitting at the top, and it's a pretty lonely place sitting at the top. But you're there in service of everyone in that organization. And as long as you don't lose sight of that, you'll be good. And so as we don't know what happened. There we go. Take us back to the beginning, right? Trust this journey. As leaders, your journey will be different than mine. It'll take twists and turns. But some of the things that I've talked about, if not all of them, are relevant to you in a leadership position, and especially as a CEO. You've got to keep a very mind about being purposeful and thinking ahead and taking care of people. Recharge yourself. It's all important. And that is how you will find success. But I think the most is about being really purpose-driven. And so on the table, you'll see one of my favorite quotes, which is, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And the reason I put that out there is because that's what this is on the rock. Every day as leaders, we are faced with difficult decisions. Our paths are unclear. Sometimes we don't even know how we're going to get to the next point. But you've got to live on that edge of your comfort zone all the time. You've got to be pushing yourself because that's where success comes from. That's where fulfillment comes from. That is where the huge advancements in our business come from, is living on the edge of that comfort zone. So don't be afraid of it. It's a little uncomfortable by definition, but it's okay because it really will drive you to the success that you're looking for within your organization and within our industry.